So on this last part 8, we're going to finish the form and I'm going to give you a code challenge for doing some additional work to the site. So one of the things, and you may have already caught this, is not only the formatting, which we'll do in a minute, but what is this form missing? The all-important submit button. And there's two ways to do submit buttons. So I'm going to go over to ChatGPT just to kind of give you an example of some of the ways you can use chat, right? And I'm going to say when creating an HTML form, which is better to use? I'm going to say input or button. Okay. So what this is showing us here is we can use the input as well. It depends on the functionality we're trying to achieve. So what this says is the button, here's the input, right? The input, now the difference is type submit. Where in the other ones, like in the email, we did type email, we could do type submit if we wanted to use the input. But on button, we could actually have a whole other tag that is just button, right? And so in summary, right, so if you need to submit a form, do this or this. But typically, and this is what I was going to say, typically these days we say use a button. And the reason I show this is that you will often, especially like when you look at your template that we'll get to with Bootstrap, you may see input and go, well, wait a minute, we learned about button. Okay, so I'm gonna use button, but I want you to know type submit does also work as well. Okay, so let's come down here and let's do button tab. Now what goes inside there is submit. Right? So now we can see we also could have a label here for this one. This one might not need it because it kind of clearly says what it is, right? It's a button. So now let's actually style this to kind of make this look a little more like the rest of the site. Again, the reason it's thrown off to the bottom is because these labels and inputs are what we call inline, and I talked about that just a little bit in the beginning, where I talked about some of the semantic forms and the H1s, right? So like when you look here, like if we were to look here and inspect, and let me just drag this over because this is an important concept. Right here, when we do a H1, that's a block level element. And the way we can tell this is, notice how when it shows you here on the page, it blocks out that entire line. So in here, the reason now we're actually seeing it is because the page has gotten so small. But by its nature, and this is often what we refer to as document flow. So the document flow became, well, it's not the flow so much, it's just the space that it's taking up. And typically, pages would not be this small, right? So this is where we don't rely on the user, because the user would never come in here, and I'm just dragging this around to kind of see this. They would never do that. That's where we have to style things in a particular way. And we're going to do a very simple style just to do this for now. So what we're going to do, because these are, again, block level, and actually the label, all we have to do is actually go over to here and do label. And this is display, because by default they're inline. So we're going to say display block. Okay, and so by doing display block, right, that kind of does some of what we want, and it's like, okay, and then we could, maybe we could also align, right? So we could also play with alignment here. But notice how the submit button is also throwing this off. So we could go over to the end of the text area, and we could do BR. So we could do a BR to do it right. Okay, so that then kind of makes that look a little better. There's all kinds of formatting we could do here, but more than anything, I just kind of wanted to start talking about, because you're going to see, and especially again, hopefully I'm going to see you all in 8085, there's just so much more we can do with display. So because by its nature, labels are inline, we can change the way they display, but this is just the beginning of the conversation around display. As a matter of fact, MDN display, there is so much, right? So this is like inline block is these labels by nature were. We changed them to block. You can do none. You can say display none will hide them. Display flex. This is definitely something that, don't worry if you've never heard of these things, but this is where we can use some really nice built-in CSS. Because the thing about CSS, and this is probably what I missed starting out this conversation, was not only are we styling our page, okay, with different styles, and I haven't even shown some of the other ways to style because I just want to kind of introduce you to some of the concepts, but really we also use it, and in this case I'm kind of ending with this because we're also using it to lay out our page, right? So in our case we have a pretty simple layout. There's really not much here, although it does kind of flow. It is the beginning of something that we could build out. It does have kind of a layout. It's got a header, right? It's got a main. It's got sections, right? It's got a footer. But when you think about most pages you see, and their layout is really much more involved, and in this case much more flexible, and that's something called responsive design. Okay, so I want you to kind of do some of your own research, and in here, right, I want you to review. Okay, so this is what I want you to do, review. Okay, so I want you to look at MDN display. So I want you to kind of look through there. I want you to do some research, and you can either do it on MDN or somewhere else called responsive design. Again, we're not going to do it here. I just want you to know about it. Okay, so do a little research there. All right, and then in here. Okay, so what you want to do here, and we'll go ahead and move over to here, is here's our first commit, which will be, right, finished form. I should say finished and styled. Didn't style it very much. Okay, so commit this code that you've done so far, because there's one more thing you're going to do before you submit, because I'm going to give you a code challenge. Okay, so here's what you're going to do for the code challenge, and I'll move this over so you can see it. Right, I want you to find images or icons to include on the page. Right, so if you go and you search for images out on the web, right, so images.google.com, you can look for like Apple, right? Now you do have to be a bit careful here, right? Because what will happen is when you click on the apple and then you click on here, it'll take you to here. And one of the things you could try to do is you could do I could do copy image address, and then I could open up a new tab, right? Oh yeah, okay, so I could try by adding, now how would I do that, right? How would I take the URL, in this case, this URL, and we've seen this actually already in one of our other assignments, right? And this was when I first had you do the GitHub, right? So in this case, you can either reference them out here, or you could right click, save image as, and then save them on your local GitHub, right? So in this case, pub lectures HTML. Now what we don't have here is a folder called images, so I would go ahead and create a folder and call them images. So I've given you two ways right now you can do this. You can either, and by the way, you could also use icons, I don't care, and I don't even tell you what kind of images. I just want you to go find, I'm going to say least 2, okay, and include them on the page. And then also create links, right? And we've done this as well, right? But if you're not sure what those are, right, you can come over and do href MDN. Okay, that gives me, how about href MDN. By the way, W3 School is a fine one to look at as well. So here's links, right? So you could do, a ref equal, and then the text itself, the link text. And then, now it doesn't have to be with an LI, although we did some LIs, so you could do that, right? So create at least two. Now there's two different kinds of links. I want both an external link, okay, and I showed you, actually I talked about external links. That would be to somewhere else, some other site that's not yours, right? Actually, you can do whatever kind of links you want. I won't even get that particular. Just create links. But typically, when you're writing links, and I showed this before, and I'll just put it here. You go, if you're going off your page, then you would do underscore blank, and what that does is it creates a new tab. Okay. Okay. So once you're done, so create at least two links. Again, play around. You reach out for help if you need it. Discord, me, whatever, it works. And then commit with your commit message here is code challenge, right? Because watching and following along with somebody is great, but really where you learn is when you start to do some stuff on your own. So make sure you push that. Remember, what you're giving me here for submission is your commit history. That's how you submit this last part. All right, talk to you later.